Garrett, with all the back and forth, where do things stand right now?
It has been a busy 24 hours, Anna, starting with Iran's counterattack at U.S. assets in the Middle East, which seems to have been mostly for show at a Qatari airbase. That kicked off discussions involving the president, the emir of Qatar, and the Iranians, while the president was also working with Israelis to try to see if they could forge this truce. The vice president got involved, and ultimately you had the announcement on Truth Social last night that there would be a ceasefire. There were some missiles exchanged on both sides in the hours between the announcement and the ceasefire going into effect that led to the president coming out on the South Lawn with that sort of colorful policing of this new ceasefire, ultimately calling Prime Minister Netanyahu, asking him to turn around Israeli planes. They were going for a counterstrike against Iran. With the president on board Air Force One, his focus now turning here to the Netherlands in this NATO summit, where he's also shared images of a text he received from the NATO Secretary General saying he'll receive another welcome win when he gets here. That's all member countries agreeing to up their defense spending to 5% of GDP. The president has long complained about European countries in particular not paying enough for their own defense. So a win here in Europe, where the president's not used to a particularly warm reception after what has been a very busy week, busy 24 hours of diplomacy.
Keir, I just spoke moments ago with the former ambassador to the U.S. from Israel, who signaled that he didn't believe Israel had violated this ceasefire, saying any strikes came before the ceasefire was to go into effect. Are allies certain that the ceasefire will now hold?
Well, that's a big question. So the accusation from the Israelis in a statement from Prime Minister Netanyahu's office, which ultimately accepted that Israel wouldn't retaliate, is that the Iranians fired a missile precisely 6 minutes after the ceasefire went into effect, and then two more missiles just around 2.5 hours after the ceasefire went into effect. That those missiles didn't do any damage, that they were stopped. So I think what the Israelis have really been angry about overnight is that attack on Beersheba, where a number of Israelis died in a residential area, and that they were furious and upset by that, understandably, and that the violations of the ceasefire by those few missiles, according to the Israelis, the Iranians deny it, by the way, that was their reason for responding. The reality is with a ceasefire is that you do get, moments like that. It doesn't necessarily all happen all at once in one moment. And President Trump's intervention appears to have fixed it. But, Anna, what's amazing is, of course, that with that expletive response from President Trump, once again, what happened a few hours ago seems like a lifetime ago. Just a couple of things just to point out. The Iranians fired missiles on Qatar, and then shortly afterwards, President Trump announced that there was a ceasefire, and we were told that the Qataris were involved in negotiating that ceasefire. And then also, of course, that the Qataris had been given advance warning of the strikes, and so had the US. And another thing that is getting less attention but is important is this question of where is the highly enriched uranium that Iran has, the 60% enriched uranium. Has their nuclear program really been, as President Trump has said, obliterated or even set back enormously? Clearly, massive damage has been done. But those are big questions, and I say that because, in the end, a ceasefire is a ceasefire, but what comes next are negotiations over those kind of issues, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, as you point out, it's such a layered situation right now. Joel, as the president gears up for this NATO summit, how do you think he'll be greeted there?
Yeah, Anna, I think that the NATO allies are going to look at him and say, this is an inherently unstable situation, and now's the time to really supercharge our diplomacy. So congratulations on getting that ceasefire, on working with the Israelis, on working, of course, with the Qataris regarding Iran. But we need a bigger process. We need to be in the game as Europe. We were in the game on Iran diplomacy for a number of years. This is how you solidify and lock in those gains that were just made, and where Israel feels like it did obtain some defensive benefits as well. And I think that's the key thing. Will the president leverage this moment, or will he sort of let it pass and then we continue to stay in an unstable situation?
General, let's not forget what happened literally just hours before this ceasefire. Iran launching a retaliatory attack against the U.S., aiming missiles at a U.S. base in Qatar. What do you think Iran was hoping to accomplish with that response?
I think this was entirely on Iran's part an attempt to persuade their own population that they weren't deeply humiliated, they weren't subject to Israeli dominance of their airspace. Look, Iran is in a really desperate situation. The economy's in the tubes. They had no good military options left. They couldn't close the Gulf of Persian Gulf to oil, or they would have alienated China and the Asian Rim. They have no allies. They've suffered devastating losses of their military, scientific, and political leadership. There must have been some really hard conversations. They had to come to the table. They had no options left. The Israelis probably would have liked the war to have gone on another week or two to go after regime targets. But essentially, they had accomplished all their objectives, and they were running out of smart munitions. That Arrow 3 missile is $4 million an interception. So it was an appropriate time to end the war. I think the peace will be fragile. And the real question is, how do you get them back to the table? How do you get them after 30 years of pursuing nuclear weapons, which has suffered a devastating impact from that U.S. strike? How do you get them to give up that objective? And by the way, we ought to assume they did move their 60% enriched uranium. It's in somebody's condo in Tehran right now, and it'll be there as a factor in the future negotiations. You can't stop the nuclear program until they sign a treaty and we get international inspectors back on the ground in Iran.
I mean, I found it very fascinating to learn that that enriched uranium can be just held in canisters, stuff they could move in the back of a truck or in the trunk of a car because of how portable it is and how they store it. General, can we be sure that Iran, the country that has chanted death to America, won't try further retaliation against the U.S.? For example, do we still need to worry about Iranian cyber attacks or those reported sleeper cells? Do they just go back to sleep?
Well, look, the Iranians are courageous, creative people. They've got a deep scientific bench. The Quds Force is still intact, capable of enormous harm. They've got a very healthy cyber warfare capability. So we should deal with them in a very wary manner. But look, again, they're on their knees. They have been knocked apart. Their own people despise them. Half the population are women are in a repressive regime. So half the population of Iran aren't Persians. They're other ethnic minorities who hate the Ayatollah and his government. I think in the longer run, it's going to be very difficult to get them to negotiate in good faith. For 46 years, they said the primary national objective of Iran was the elimination of the state of Israel. You got to get them to walk away from that. So this looks to me like a year or more of diplomacy ahead of us, and hopefully it will lower the tension. But President Trump's strike on the 3 nuclear sites was a bold, brilliant move and contributed to this situation.
Joel, you also worked in the Bush administration during the Iraq invasion. That led to regime change. Do you see it happening in Iran? Because President Trump says that's not what he wants.
Well, you know, Anna, there are a lot of lessons learned about the Iraq experience. And the primary one is that a regime change is a horrible policy goal for the United States. It never ends up as predicted. We don't control the internal political dynamics of other countries. And so one should not really engage in that kind of thinking. But I think that the challenge now is that this regime in Tehran is so dangerous and cornered in many ways. And while now it has been brought to its knees, as General McCaffrey says, and it had enough, clearly, my instinct is that we're going to likely see a more shadowy war now underway to try to destabilize that regime, not necessarily to send in troops, and certainly not by us, but perhaps by Israel and others. and to try to erode it from underneath to see if something can happen inside Iran. But, you know, the Iranian military, the IRGC, the Basij, other security forces controlled by the Iranian government, they are still there, still in place, and they have control. There are no other significant military counters to that. So this is part of the shadow war that may take place, but it's a very dangerous and difficult and I think unwise policy to pursue.
And Keir, we just learned in the past 24 hours that President Trump apparently made a last-ditch effort at diplomacy even before Saturday's strikes. There were apparently contacts with Iranian officials, but that Iran supreme leader could not be reached. Do his generals know where he is? Is there a clear chain of command and communication, or are there cracks in the regime?
Oh, you don't need to have any intelligence or insight into Iran to, kind of realize that the regime in Iran is shaking right now. I mean, that would be inevitable for any government facing the kind of barrage that it's faced. I will say one thing, Anna, and it's an interesting point. Iran is on the cusp of regime change because Ayatollah Khamenei is in his 80s. Now, okay, perhaps he's going to live many, many more years and no matter what people think of him, I guess you could say, good health to him. But even Iran itself is preparing for that shift. And a really interesting question is what does all of that that's happened in the past 12 days, what impact does that have on that change? There are extremists and people who are more liberal in Iran who gains power when that comes about. Because that could be as much as important to what the future holds as what has happened in the past few days.